two quantifiers that exists and for all. When we've made these terms precise and are sure we know how to use them properly, our analysis of language will be over. The word quantifier is used in a very idiosyncratic fashion. In normal use, it means specifying the number or amount of something. In mathematics, it's used to refer to two extremes. There is at least one and for all. These are all we need to look at because of the special nature of mathematical truths. When mathematics is used as a subject in its own right, as opposed to being a separate tool used in other disciplines and walks of life, the core of the subject is the theorem. And the majority of mathematical theorems will have one of two forms. There is an object X having property P. For all objects X, property P holds. I'll take these one at a time. We're looking at statements of... How did you get on with that passive assignment 4? To give you a chance to complete it, this lecture is also fairly short. And this time, the assignment is down to a single page. So keep working on that last assignment. It really is crucial to master those ideas and that terminology. Knowing when and why one statement implies another, and being able to distinguish between necessity and sufficiency are crucial abilities in today's world. There are two more language constructions that are fundamental to expressing and proving mathematical facts, and which mathematicians therefore have to be precise about. The two quantifiers, there exists and for all. When we've made these terms precise, and are sure we know how to use them properly, our analysis of language will be over. The word quantifier is used in a very idiosyncratic fashion here. In normal use, it means specifying the number or amount of something. In mathematics, it's used to refer to the two extremes. There is at least one and for all. These are all we need to look at because of the special nature of mathematical truths. When mathematics is viewed as a subject in its own right, as opposed to being a set of tools used in other disciplines and walks of life, the core of the subject is the theorem. And the majority of mathematical theorems will have one of two forms. There is an object X having property P. For all objects X, property P holds. I'll take these one at a time. We're looking at statements of the form, there's an object X having property P. For example, the equation x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0 has a real root. We can emphasize that this is an existence statement by writing it in the following form. There is a real number x such that x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. Or we could write it this way. There exists a real number x such that x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. It doesn't matter whether we write it with an is or an exists, it's an existence statement. The symbolic abbreviation that mathematicians use for exists is a back to front E. E for exists, of course. So a mathematician would write this as follows. There exists an x such that x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. This symbol is called the existential quantifier. In the following form, there it P holds. I'll take these one at a time. We're looking at statements of the form, there's an object X having property P.
For example, the equation x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0 has a real root. We can emphasize that this is an existence statement by writing it in the following form. There is a real number x such that x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. Or we could write it this way. There exists a real number x such that x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. Doesn't matter whether we write it with an is or an exists, it's an existence statement. The symbolic abbreviation that mathematicians use for exists is a back to front E. E for exists, of course. So a mathematician would write this as follows. There exists an x such that x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. This symbol is equals 0. Doesn't matter whether we write it with an is or an exists, it's an existence statement. The symbolic abbreviation that mathematicians use for exists is a back to front E. E for exists, of course. So a mathematician would write this as follows. There exists an x such that x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. This symbol is called the existential quantifier. The simplest way to prove an existential statement of this form is to find an actual x that satisfies the property. And with this example, it's easy. Take x equals -1. And x squared is 2x plus 1 equals -1 squared, which is 1, plus 2 times -1, which is -2. Then we've got plus 1. 1 minus 2 plus 1 equals 0, which solves it. Well, that was a simple example. Sometimes we can prove an existential statement without finding an actual object that satisfies the property. Let me give you an example of that. I'm going to prove this statement. 2x plus 1 equals -1 squared, which is 1, plus 2 times -1, which is -2. Then we've got plus 1. 1 minus 2 plus 1 equals 0, which solves it. Well, that was a simple example. Sometimes we can prove an existential statement without finding an actual object that satisfies the property. Let me give you an example of that. I'm going to prove this statement. There exists an x such that x cubed plus 3x plus 1 equals 0. I'm not going to find an actual x that solves this cubic equation, but I am going to show that there is a solution. I'm going to start by looking at the function y equals x cubed plus 3x plus 1. This is a continuous function. Now, continuity of functions is actually a fairly deep topic. I will touch on it briefly at the end of the course, but for my present purpose, all I need to know is that a continuous function is one whose graph is a smooth curve with no breaks and jumps. And you should be sufficiently familiar with cubic equations by now to know that the cubic equation has a nice smooth curve that looks something like that in many cases. Up and down, two curves. Okay. The point is it doesn't have any jumps. If x equals -1, this curve has value, this function has value, -1 cubed, which is -1, plus 3 times -1, which is -3, plus 1, which is -3. If x equals +1, the curve or the function has value y equals 1 plus 3 plus 1, which equals 5. So the curve lies below the x-axis for x equals -1, and above the x-axis for x equals +1. So it looks something like this. -1, +1, it's going to lie somewhere down here. -1, it's going to lie somewhere up here at +1. And somewhere it's going to cross the axis. That, who knows? The point is, which is -3. If x equals +1, 1 plus 3, so x equals +1. So it looks something like this. -1, +1, it's going to lie somewhere down here. -1, it's going to lie somewhere up here at +1. And somewhere it's going to cross the axis. That, who knows? The point is, it's going to have to cross the axis somewhere or other, either to the left of the origin, or to the right of the origin. It doesn't matter where. The important point is somewhere between -1 and +1. This curve crosses the axis. And when it crosses the axis, the y value is 0. So we haven't said which x solves the equation. We haven't even said whether the x is negative or positive. But we do know there is such an x. We've shown that the x exists and satisfies the equation without finding such an x. This is an example of an indirect. We haven't proved it directly by finding an x that solves the equation. We've simply shown that there is an x that solves the equation. A lot of mathematical proofs are of this nature. We show that there is a solution to some equation, or there is an object that satisfies some property or other without finding such an object. Pretty cool, huh? Time for a quiz. Cross the axis somewhere or other, either to the left of the origin or to the right of the origin. Doesn't matter where. The important point is somewhere between -1 and +1. This curve crosses the axis. And when it crosses the axis, the y value is 0. So we haven't said which x solves the equation. We haven't even said whether the x is negative or positive. But we do know there is such an x. We've shown that an x exists and satisfies the equation without finding such an x. This is an example of an indirect. We haven't proved it directly by finding an x that solves the equation. We've simply shown that there is an x that solves the equation. A lot of mathematical proofs are of this nature. We show that there is a solution to some equation, or there is an object that satisfies some property or other without finding such an x. Pretty cool, huh? Time for a quiz. A simple +1. This curve crosses the axis. Some property or other without finding such an answer. Pretty cool, huh? Time for a quiz. A simple modification of that last argument yields a more specific result. Which of the following is it? Is it 1? There is an x less than 0, such that x cubed plus 3x plus 1 equals 0? Or is it 2? There's an x greater than 0, such that x cubed plus 3x plus 1 equals 0? Okay, which one do you think it is? Well, the answer is 1. And here's how we can get that. In the previous argument, I looked at the curve at x equals negative 1 and x equals plus 1, and I showed it with something like this. Negative 1, the curve is below the x-axis, plus 1, the curve is above the x-axis, and so it has to cross the x-axis somewhere between negative 1 and plus 1. But instead of going between negative 1 and plus 1, I could go between negative 1 and the origin itself. Well, note that if x equals 0, then y equals x cubed plus 3x plus 1 is 1. So at 0, it's somewhere here. Which means it's negative at negative 1, it's positive at 0, so it's somewhere between negative 1 and 0 that it crosses the axis. Since the curve lies below the x-axis at x equals negative 1, and above the x-axis at x equals 0, it must cross the x-axis between negative 1 and 0. Or I could prove it a different way. I could simply observe that if x is greater than or equal to 0, then x cubed plus 3x plus 1 is greater than 0. And in particular, it's not equal to 0. So 2 is false. And that just means 1.